Hi, I'm Tony Northup, and this is a free 1-hour tutorial for the Sony a6500. You don't have to watch the whole thing, not all at once at least. Check the description down below and you'll see links where you can jump forward in case I'm covering something you already know. If you have a different camera, you want to share a different camera tutorial with your friends, go to sdp.io/tutorials. They're all free. I'm going to cover everything that I think is important for like the core functionality of photography. I'm going to get you to take great pictures, but I'm not going to cover things like special effects, shooting in black and white and tilt shift. That's something you can do on your own. But for me, I prefer to do that stuff either with my smartphone or on the computer. That's kind of post-production stuff for me, so I won't cover that. First up, let's talk about physically kind of assembling the camera. You might have done this already. When you get it, the lens will be apart from the body. You'll take the caps off, line up the white dot on the lens with the white dot on the mount, and then twist it. And then just wiggle it to make sure it locks in place. To insert the battery, you will look for these metal contacts and put that in towards the inside of the camera and push it all the way in until it clicks. Right next to it is your SD card. You'll need an SD card. I suggest getting a big one. I'll give you some links in just a minute, but 64 gigs is good, 128 gigs is good. Make sure the label is facing out. There's a little diagram on the inside of here that can help you. And then push that all the way in until it clicks. And then close that door and push that little latch there to hold it in place. Now you're pretty much ready to go. Here's a link to buy an SD card. Bigger's better than smaller. 64 gigs is good, 128 gigs is not too big, especially if you're shooting 4K video. You can fill it up pretty quickly. It's always nice to have extra space. You will eventually fill it up. A faster memory card will help if you're shooting action. So they'll rate it based on speed. You can spend more for like one of the Extreme Pro SanDisk cards is really good. But you will pay more for those things. If you're not shooting sports, then feel free to get El Cheapo card here in a bigger capacity. You should buy at least one extra battery. These things burn through batteries so fast. You will not get through a day of vacation using one of these. You will need two. We travel with usually 3 batteries and some sort of charger for it. So go pick up the original Sony batteries. The generic ones work great for a few weeks and then they will die suddenly and leave you stranded. So here's a link to the Sony batteries. Like I said, get at least one extra, but maybe a couple extra. One nice feature about these Sony cameras is they do USB charge. So there's a port here on the side. You can flip that open like that. And then you will see a USB connector there, a micro USB connector. It's just like if you have an Android phone or just about any other USB device, not an iPhone, but just about anything else, you can use the same chargers, your wall chargers, your battery chargers to charge it up. So I like to keep a charger in my bag to charge my phone or my camera. Just keep in mind how convenient it is to have that there. I'll go over a couple other objects in this port here. If I flip this door open, at the very top here is the USB port that you'll use for charging. You can also use that to transfer pictures from your camera to your computer, though I suggest buying a separate USB 3 memory card reader. Just search for USB 3 memory card reader at Amazon, you can find it. And below that you will see I think it's a micro HDMI port. HDMI is the digital standard that you use to get video and audio from anything to a TV usually, or a monitor. So you could get a micro HDMI to HDMI cable and hook it up to a monitor or TV and then watch the output from the camera or play back pictures. And you're probably never going to use it. You could use it to put on a slideshow in your living room on your TV, but most people would rather just pass the camera and look at the pictures that way. You could also use it to connect to an external field monitor and record even 4K video. But again, that's probably not something you're doing if you're using this particular camera. And at the bottom here, this little red port is a microphone jack. So you could plug in an external mic, and I will tell you what mic I'm using at the end of this video. I recommend a lot of accessories at the end of the video. And that's about it for the external ports. At the top here, you do have a flash hot shoe, so you can pull that cover back and stick a flash in there. Any flash that's compatible with Sony should work okay. Let's talk about the process of taking a picture. First, the conveniently located power switch. You'll go from off to on. Notice it's right next to the shutter there. You're going to want to flip that off every time you're not using it and flip it on every time you're about to use it. So get in the habit of just hitting that until it's completely unconscious, and it just happens all the time, and I promise your batteries will last a lot longer if you do that. Once it's on, you can either look at the viewfinder on the back of the screen and use it just like a cell phone, or you can hold the viewfinder up to your eye and it should automatically switch over for you. Photographing, taking pictures happens in 2 phases. The first is focusing. So to focus, you'll push the shutter button halfway and you'll see some green lights light up when it focuses, and then you'll push it all the way to take the picture. That's it. It will automatically show you the picture, but you can also review pictures you've taken by hitting the play button there. Once you have the play button pressed, you can browse through different pictures by pushing on the directional pad left or right here. You can also view different bits of information about the picture you just took. At the top of the directional pad, you'll see it's written DISP. That's display. So if I push that, I can switch through different display modes. This shows me my luminance histogram as well as my red, green, and blue histograms. That tells you whether your picture is underexposed or overexposed, or if you absolutely nailed it. If you're not sure what a histogram is, check chapter 4 of my book, Stunning Digital Photography. I'll give you a link later. It's cheap and it will explain all that to you, as well as the importance of it. Let's talk about using the diopter. Now, like I mentioned, you can either use the screen at the back or the electronic viewfinder to take pictures. If you're a contacts lens wearer like I am, or a glasses wearer, you can dial in a prescription into the electronic viewfinder here. It can benefit anybody because most people don't have completely perfect vision. So this dial right here next to the electronic viewfinder, that's your diopter. It's a little tiny switch there and it's kind of hard to reach, but you just turn it. So what you'll do is you'll hold the camera up to your eye, and then don't look through the lens, but look at the numbers at the bottom of the screen and turn that diopter until everything is as sharp as possible. And remember where that diopter is, because it will get hit accidentally and turned. And when it happens, you'll pick the camera up to your eye and you'll say, why won't my camera focus? Why is everything blurry? One of the most common questions I get, it's probably that the diopter got hit. It's probably not your camera. Let's talk about the different modes of photography. Now, when you get the camera, the mode dial here will probably be set to auto, meaning the camera does everything for you, really doesn't leave any thinking left to you, but the camera isn't as smart as you because you're a person. So you can take control of your pictures and change different aspects of it that really control the story that your pictures tell and make much better pictures. It's pretty easy to do. Aperture Priority is where I spend most of my time. I never use auto mode. If I ever feel like I want the camera to be full auto, I almost always use program mode here with a P. But most of the time I want to control at least one setting, and Aperture Priority gives me control over just the aperture. If you're like, Tony, I don't know what aperture is, I'll show you an example in a second, and you can check chapter 4 of Stunning Digital Photography. But if you like videos, here's a free video, sdp.io/fstop, that will tell you every little thing you ever need to know about aperture. Now that I have the camera in Aperture Priority mode, I can change the f-stop by, if you look at the back of the screen here, you can see at the bottom it says f4.5. As I change the main dial here, this is the main dial. As I change the main dial, you can see that f-stop number is changing. As I go to the right, it goes up to 16, 18, 22, 25, and as I go to the left, it goes down to 4.5. Let me suggest, if you're just watching this, pick up your camera and do this with me. Do every little step, and that will help you learn a lot. Now let's talk about what those numbers actually mean. When you are moving this dial, you're changing the opening in the lens there. It's just like the pupil of your eye, like the iris that opens and closes. And at a low f-stop number, like f4.5 or f2, the opening is really big, like on this diagram. And at high f-stop numbers, the opening gets really small. Now, it's weird that high numbers mean a small opening and big numbers mean a little opening, but you can see the way it's written is like f/16, f/32. Think of it like a fraction. It's like 1/16 or 1/32. As the numbers get bigger, the fraction actually gets smaller. That will help those of you who are mathematically inclined. But here's an actual practical real world example. I took 3 pictures of my wife at f1.8, f8, and f22. At f1.8, you can see the background is completely blurred. And This is an important decision for a photographer to make. I might take that picture when I want the viewer of the picture to focus on the subject. That's why a setting like that is common for portraiture, to blur out the background, because it eliminates any distractions in the background and you only see one thing, which is the face. Now, I could dial in more context, more of the environment, more of the street behind her just by moving that main dial and picking a higher f-stop number. So you can see at f8, it's a moderate f-stop number, but suddenly that street in New York behind her starts to come into context and the viewer of the picture gets more of the story. They can see she's in an alley. They can see in the distance there are people and cars. If I raise the f-stop number to f22, everything snaps sharp. There are distractions. You're not just looking at her face anymore. Now you can see all the stuff going on in the background, for better or worse. Now, you might like the picture at f1.8 better. It certainly looks nicer. But if you're trying to tell a story of who you are and what you're doing and where you are, a higher f-stop number might be a better choice. And that's why the camera's automatic mode isn't the best thing, because it's making these decisions for you. And your job as a photographer is to think about those things. So once again, visit sdp.io/fstop or chapter 4 of Stunning Digital Photography to get a complete understanding of how to use Aperture. I'll also say, if you're trying to get crazy background blur like that with your kit lens, you probably won't do it. But at the end of this video, I'll suggest the 50mm f1.8 lens, which will support lower f-stops. The reason for that is, if you look at this lens, you can see on the top here, it says 3.5 to 5.6. They usually write that on the front of the lens too, 3.5 to 5.6. That's the minimum f-stop number that this lens supports, because you have to have a bigger physical opening. So lenses with lower f-stop numbers like f1.8 tend to be bigger and more expensive. That means that you will never be able to dial in a number lower than that. It's 3.5 when you're zoomed all the way back and 5.6 when you're zoomed all the way in. It's called a variable aperture zoom lens. Let's talk about shutter priority. Another setting that you can control in the camera is the shutter speed. And this is, you can think of it like blinking your eye. Whenever the shutter is open, the camera is gathering light. And pictures don't happen in an instant. They happen over a period of time, even if it's a short period of time, like 1/60th of a second. Things move in 1/60th of a second. If somebody is playing soccer and running to chase the ball, in that 60th of a second, their feet and hands and whole body will have moved so much that your picture would be completely blurred. At the same time, some of that movement might be interesting. It might add to the story, because if you were to shoot a soccer player at 1/8000th of a second, they would appear to be completely motionless. And it might not really convey what you were trying to, the story you're trying to tell. 3 pictures of my daughter that I took when she was young and on one of those spinning merry-go-round things in the playground. And we're spinning at the same speed in all 3 of these pictures. I'm opposite her on the merry-go-round, so I'm spinning at the same speed. At 1/8 of a second, you can see the background is completely panned. And anybody looking at the picture knows that there's motion. It conveys because of the slow shutter speed. At 1/30th of a second, that movement is much less because the shutter wasn't open as long and we didn't move as far. And at 1/125th of a second, the motion is completely frozen and the story of a spinning is completely lost. It tells a completely different story, right? And again, you want to be making those decisions. You don't want the camera to make those choices for you because it so much controls the story that you're telling. To select shutter priority mode, change the mode dial to S. Now you'll use the main dial to control the shutter speed, just like you controlled the aperture. The main dial changes personalities. So now it changes the shutter speed instead. If you look at the lower left here, 1/30th of a second, if I go to the left, it selects a slower shutter speed. If I keep going, it will go all the way down to 1 full second, which you might use for like taking pictures of stars at night. And I can keep going even farther to the left, all the way down to 30 seconds. That's as high as I can go in shutter priority mode, or the slowest I can go. If I scroll to the right, you'll see I can go all the way up to 1/4000th of a second. And notice the screen got dark as I did that because the shutter's only going to be open for such a short amount of time that the camera can't gather enough light to properly expose the picture. So I like, for taking pictures of people, usually 1/30th of a second for people who are really still, or 1/60th of a second for for more people, for most people in most situations, most portraits, 1/60th is good. If you're shooting kids sports, I like to be at 1/250th of a second. And high school, adult sports, 1/500th of a second is good. People tend to move fast. And things like flying birds, I'll be at 1/1600th or 1/2000th of a second. And then above that, it's things like hummingbirds. If you wanted to mostly freeze hummingbird wings, you'd want to be at 1/4000th of a second. For detailed information about using shutter speed, read again Chapter 4 of my book, Stunning Digital Photography. What if you want to control both the shutter speed and the aperture at the same time? That's an option in manual mode. To select manual mode, you'll switch the mode dial over to M for manual. Now, the main dial here controls the aperture, just like it did in Aperture Priority mode. If you want to control the shutter speed, you'll move the secondary dial here. Same as the directional pad, you'll just move it left or right. So now you're independently controlling both the shutter speed and aperture. You can use this in a studio environment. If you don't want to take complete control over your exposure yet, I suggest you put the camera into automatic ISO mode. And I'll show you how to use ISO in just a second, but ISO is labeled here on the directional pad. So just push to the right and then scroll to the left all the way to get to the top and select auto. So now you can independently control the shutter speed and the aperture, and the camera will adjust the ISO to make sure you still nail the exposure. For detailed information about how to select your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO, visit stp.io/go manual. It's a free video. I mentioned it a couple times already, but I want to take a second and plug my book, Stunning Digital Photography, the #1 photography book in the world. It's not just a book, it's a video book. It has over 14 hours of high quality video in it. So if you hate reading, you can just watch the videos, but for best results, you can read the book and watch the videos. They're kind of intermixed in there. So you'll read a little section on aperture, then you'll watch a video on aperture that will really make it clear in your mind. Today, this is free. I'm just going to tell you all the buttons and dials and how to get pictures with your camera. But there's way too much content in Stunning Digital Photography to teach it all at once. It's the important aspects of photography, like storytelling and mood and posing and expression, lighting and planning. And those are the things that capture the moment the way you see it, but also create art or allow you to sell your photography. Those are all really important things. And the ebook is $10. And that comes with all the videos. If you want the paperback book, it's like $20 or so. You can get it on Amazon. Search Tony Northrup or Stunning Digital Photography for reviews. People like it. You can also get it directly from us at stp.io/store. If you get into post-processing, you'll probably want Adobe Lightroom. Adobe Lightroom is a software app for your computer, Windows, Mac, whatever, that will help you organize the thousands of pictures that you will no doubt take. So you can actually find your pictures when you go to look for them later. It also does editing, like cropping and changing the exposure, that kind of thing. I have a book on it. So if you do get Lightroom, be sure to get my book, because otherwise it's very hard to figure out. If you get into hardcore editing, like Adobe Photoshop stuff, like portraiture, changing shapes of people's bodies and removing pimples and stuff, Photoshop's perfect for that. I also have a book for that. And if you just want to know all the mysteries of flashes and lenses and which studio lighting you should buy, how to build a computer for photo editing, check out my photography buying guide. Again, those are all available on Amazon, or you can visit stp.io/store, where we have free worldwide shipping. Bulb mode allows you to take pictures longer than 30 seconds. With bulb mode, the shutter will stay open for as long as you have your finger on the shutter button. To use bulb mode, you'll put the camera in manual mode and then move the shutter speed dial all the way to the left. And you can see we'll get to 30 seconds. And then if I go one more tick to the left, it gets to bulb, just says bulb down here. Now I can keep the shutter open for 5 seconds by holding my finger in the shutter for 5 seconds and then letting go. My picture is going to be white because 5 seconds is a long exposure in this bright room. There'd be no reason to do bulb mode for 5 seconds, because you could just set the shutter speed for 5 seconds. But if you wanted to do a 2-minute exposure, for some reason they don't let you set a shutter speed of longer than 30 seconds. You might do a 2-minute exposure if you were taking pictures of stars at night, for example. So you would use bulb mode for that, and hook up a remote shutter trigger to the USB port on this camera. For detailed information about bulb mode and how to work around it without having to actually buy a remote shutter trigger, software tricks, visit sdp.io/filter. A couple of links I'm going to give you for different types of photography you might be interested in. If you're into night photography, I love taking pictures in the dark, so relaxing. Visit sdp.io/np. If you want to get into landscape photography, Ansel Adams, visit sdp.io/ls. If you want to get into wildlife photography, we have a free video, sdp.io/wl. Now let's talk about the different shutter modes. I'm going to go back into Aperture Priority mode for a bit, and when I take a picture, switch to the display on, even if I hold my finger on the shutter, it's only going to take one picture. And that's okay. But I almost always take 2 or 3 pictures at a time. And the reason for that is that sometimes when you push the shutter button, you shake the camera a little bit. So your first picture might be a little shaky. Or you might be taking a portrait and somebody will blink in that instance and you won't know it. Digital film is free. You can take as many pictures as you want. It doesn't cost you anything more. So I frequently will take 3 or 4 pictures, and then when I'm back on my computer or processing on my phone, I'll just pick the best one of those and delete the others. So rather than having to push my finger on the shutter 3 times, I will set it to a continuous shutter where it will just rattle off pictures at a high speed. This camera is very fast. To switch to a different shutter mode, look at your directional pad here. On the left, you'll see what looks like a stack of copies. Push that, and now you can switch down to continuous shooting high. On this camera, you'll notice that it's showing a little arrow to the left there. I can scroll to the left and pick from a couple of different modes. Now, continuous shooting high, I'll show you what that does. Really fast, right? That might be too fast for you. You might find that it takes an annoying amount of pictures. So you could also pick continuous shooting low. That's kind of a more manageable pace that will prevent you from racking up thousands and thousands of pictures. I will also show you that there's a mode called continuous shooting high plus, even faster. But the camera is not focusing in between shots. So if you're shooting sports and you want to make sure you keep somebody in focus, continuous shooting high is the right mode. If you just want to get as many pictures as possible as somebody's like swinging the bat on a base and they're not moving, you don't need to refocus, then switch over to continuous shooting high. But for me, day-to-day basis, it's continuous shooting high or continuous shooting mid. Self-timer is useful. You'll push the shutter button and then the camera will wait, 2 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever, and then take the picture. It's good for a couple of scenarios. The first is that you might put the camera on a tripod and take a picture of yourself with your family. So you want to be in the picture, you'll run around the camera and put your arm around your family and get it done. It's the same button right here on the right on the directional pad. You'll just scroll down a bit. And here you can see the self-timer, 10 seconds, or better yet, scroll down one more and pick self-timer continuous 10 seconds, 3 images. Now we can scroll to the left or right to select from a couple of different options here. If you're taking a selfie with your family, a good option here might be self-timer continuous 5 seconds, 5 images. And I'll tell you why. We'll select that. And now when I push the shutter button, you can see it's going to blink for a few seconds and then it will change pace. Yeah, it's picking up a little bit. Now it's rattling off 5 pictures. That's for the exact same reason that I just told you, that one of those pictures is going to have people blinking in it. And one of them will have somebody feeling a little uncomfortable, but one of them will be perfect. So if you take multiple pictures, again, you have the opportunity to pick the best one. Another reason you might use the self-timer delay, let's switch it to a 2-second timer. We can go up to just the self-timer, the option above it, and just take a single picture at a time. Self-timer 2 seconds will, it's really useful if you have the camera on a tripod to eliminate shutter shake. So if I push the shutter button here, it actually pushes the camera down. And you won't notice it in most pictures, but if you're taking macro photography or landscapes that you want it to be just as sharp as possible, set that 2-second shutter. And then after 2 seconds, all the shutter shake will be gone and you will, I promise, get just a little bit sharper picture, especially if you're using a slower shutter speed like in low light. When you're done with that, be sure to go back and set it back to continuous shooting high or whatever it is that you normally use, because it's really frustrating when you're trying to capture a quick moment and you forgot to turn off the shutter delay and the camera's waiting 10 seconds before it takes a picture. So I taught you about aperture and shutter priority and manual mode. And those will not generally fix pictures that are too bright or too dark. If you're getting pictures that are too bright or too dark, the way you fix it is with exposure compensation. That's how you tell the camera, hey, you just did auto exposure, but you did it wrong. And that happens a lot. If you're taking a picture of a friend against like an overcast, bright sky, your friend's face could be completely in shadow. And you don't want to expose for that bright sky, you want to expose for the friend's face, right? That's the important part of the picture. What you would do is you would brighten the picture by using exposure compensation and then retake it. So to use exposure compensation, what you'll do is you'll push down on the directional pad. You'll see this little plus minus sign there. You'll push down and then you can dial in 1 stop of exposure compensation, 2 stops. You can see on the viewfinder it's getting brighter and brighter. If I go to 5 stops, everything's super bright. You can also, if your picture's too bright, you can dial in negative stops of exposure compensation. That makes everything darker. So this screen here, you can see 0 is what the camera thinks is properly exposed. And you can see that's just way too dark. So I actually want that to be like plus 2 stops to make that screen nice and white. There we go. Now, after you're done, you want to go back into the exposure compensation setting and then bring it back down to 0, just so that you don't mess yourself up the next time you go to take a picture. For detailed information about using exposure compensation, visit sdp.io/EC. What if you aren't sure what the exposure should be? What if you want the camera to take multiple pictures at different exposures so that later you can go back and pick the right one? It's actually not that meaningful nowadays because you can see the exposure before you take the picture and just be sure that you're getting it right. But when it is useful is when you want to create high dynamic range HDR imagery. So I'll show you how to turn on bracketing on this camera. To turn on bracketing, you'll push right on the directional pad, same as for the continuous shutter, the stack of copies. But you'll scroll down past the self timer down to continuous bracket. Now, you want to scroll to the right until you get over to, usually what I like to do is 2 EV, 3 images. EV is exposure value. Each EV is a doubling or a halving of light. So 2 EV means you double the light twice, which means you gather 4 times more light. And what will happen is if we set it to 2 EV, 3 images, I'll select that. And then when I take a picture, it took 3 pictures in a row at different exposures. So as I browse through them here, you can see that's the brightest picture, the last one. That's a dim picture. And then this is the first picture it took, a properly exposed picture. So bracketing takes pictures at different exposures, properly exposed, underexposed, and overexposed. Back at the computer, you can either pick one of those that has the best exposure and delete the others, or you could blend them together to create like a really beautiful picture with a ton of detail in the shadows and highlights using high dynamic range techniques. Chapter 11 in my book, Stunning Digital Photography, shows you how to do HDR. Let's talk about the different focusing modes. I'm going to go in and turn bracketing off because that would be annoying. We'll set it back to continuous shooting high. So when we focus by pushing the shutter button down halfway, the camera will find a subject and lock in the focus. And by default, your camera's probably in what's called AFA, automatic focus, or artificial intelligence focus, where the camera is going to figure out if the subject is still or moving. And if it senses that the subject is moving, it's going to try to keep it in focus. And AFA can be okay. Sometimes, however, you don't want the camera doing that thinking for you. You either want to lock in on a still subject and make sure you get really precise focus, or track a moving subject for situations like sports. So you can take control of the focusing mode to switch out of AFA and into one of the different focusing modes. So I'll hit the FN button, and the second option on the top row here is focus mode. I'll select that, and you can see automatic AFA is currently selected. If I want to focus on a still subject, I'll use single shot AF, or if I want to track a moving subject, I'll use continuous AF. So which do you think you use for sports? Use continuous AF, right? Now, you have a couple of other options down here. DMF allows you to use autofocus, but then grab the focusing ring on the lens and manually focus when you need to. This lens doesn't have it, but if you look at this lens, it has a separate zoom ring and a separate focus ring. So DMF would allow you to manually focus without having to switch into manual mode. Like, manual mode's always available. And if you've used SLR systems, That's how most lenses work by default, so that might be what you're more comfortable with. The last option down here is just manual focus, where you have to just manually focus everything using the lens, and the camera will not automatically focus for you. So AFA is okay for most situations, and this camera actually does it pretty well. For detailed information about focusing, visit sdp.io/focus. You can also choose from different focusing areas. Now, this camera, thankfully, has a touchscreen. So I'll show you a really easy thing to do. You can just touch the screen and the camera will focus there. That, for most people, that's going to be exactly what you need. But you can also tell the camera to automatically focus anywhere in the scene or to focus in a single pinpointed spot. You can also tell the camera to track a moving subject as it moves around the scene, which is also useful for sports. So let's figure out how to change those different focusing areas. Once again, we can use the FN button here. I find that the easiest way to do it. And this gives us a bunch of different options that we can choose from. This third option here is the focus area. So if I select that, we can see the different options. The top one is wide, which means the entire scene can be focused on. It kind of looks like that. The second option here is zone. So you can see it's not focusing anywhere in the scene, but now just in the middle, and I can control where that zone is by using the directional pad here. I can also touch with my finger to move the zone around to different places. Hit the FN button again and go to the focus area. And now let's pick center. Now the focusing point's always in the middle. You'll never use that. Hit FN again, go to focus area, and select one of these options. The next option here is the one I use most of the time, which is the flexible spot option. And for this, you can scroll left to right to choose from 3 different flexible spot modes. Flexible spot L, M, or S. L, of course, is a large flexible spot. You can see it's like a big focusing point. And of course, you can move that around. Flexible spot M or S give you smaller focusing points. You can see now it's a smaller point. Smaller points are more precise. If you need to focus right on somebody's eye and you want to nail it, use flexible spot S. But there's a penalty for that. The smaller the focusing point, the harder it is for the camera to focus, because you're saying, hey, don't focus in this slightly outer area. You're making it focus on this tiny little spot. It's just, everything will slow down a little bit. The camera will misfocus more often. So you're choosing between speed and reliability and precision. If you want precision focusing, use flexible spot S. It's actually okay in this camera, but pick whatever compromise you want. Now, when you have a small point like this, you can move it around with the directional pad here, and you can see that actually takes a pretty long time. If you were trying to switch from focusing on the left eye to the right eye, people would get pretty bored while you move that around. Of course, the touchscreen is a better way to do this. If you're using the electronic viewfinder, you can drag your finger across the screen like that and move that focusing point anywhere in the scene. And that works really, really well. That's how I would suggest using the flexible spot, is with the viewfinder and your eye like that, because you can just really quickly whip it across the scene. You have a couple of options for how to configure that aspect of the using the touchscreen to control the focusing point. And to change those, hit the menu button and then scroll to the right until you get to the toolbox up here. And then page 3, they call it setup 3. You'll scroll down and you can see a few options related to it. For touch operation, you want to have touch panel and pad on generally. And then the touchpad vertical, you want that to be on. And then the touchpad area set. You can have it track your thumb all the way across the screen, in which case if you want to focus on the left, you have to drag your thumb all the way over here. And my hands just aren't big enough to do that. I find right quarter area is too small. So for my hands, right half area is perfect, but that's not the default. If you have smaller hands, you might be happier with right quarter area, but I'm going to do right half area like that. That works really well for me. And that should get you through most of focusing situations. There is also a lock-on AF that's really useful for sports, where it will focus on a subject, and then if the subject moves across the screen, it will try to track it as it moves. You can't use that when you have automatic AF, AFA turned on. So the first thing we have to do is change the focusing mode. Do that by hitting FN here. go to AFA, and then let's switch to AFC, continuous AF. Now I'll hit the AF button and go over to focus area. And let's scroll down to lock on AF. So I'll select that. And so now let's see, I'll focus on that R there, and it locks it. And then as I move around the screen, you can see it continues tracking it pretty well. Okay, it's not perfect, but you can see it's trying to track it as it moves across the scene. It's doing a pretty good job. It's useful for sports. But I will give you a tip about shooting sports. You can see, you can think, oh, I need to shoot sports. I need to go in and set the shutter to continuous, and then change it to AFC, and then turn on tracking AF, and all these different settings. Or what you can do is allow the camera to do some of the thinking and change the mode dial over to scene. Now in scene mode, you'll switch it into sports mode, and you'll do that by hitting the FN button and then scrolling down to the lower right, scene selection. Right now it's in portrait, so I'm just going to jump down to sports action. And this, you can see it sets it to AFC, continuous shutter, and that makes life all that much better. It's also tracking focus really, really well. Even if you could remember all those things, besides turning things on, it also turns things off. Like if you have face detection autofocus enabled, that's a helpful feature, but it will slow down the camera's autofocus system unnecessarily. So you'll get the best results when you just go into the sports scene mode. But that's really the only time I use one of those scene modes. Now let's talk about smile and face detection, and in fact, eye detection. Useful features where the camera will intelligently look at the scene and say, hey, there's a person's face there. Let's focus on that. It can save you from having to select like a specific focus point and move it around. It makes life much easier. But when you turn it on, it slows down the camera a little bit because the camera has to spend some of its processing time looking for faces, and that means like focusing in general can be slower. It's a trade-off. To turn on face detection, you'll hit the menu button here, and then on the first camera icon, there are a lot of pages. Page 14 of the first camera icon, yeah, the first option, smile face detect. So you'll click that, and by default it says register faces. There's this whole process where you can show it specific faces that it should focus on. You should never use that. It's a complete pain and almost useless. Instead, what I'm going to recommend you do is just use the generic face detection. So just select that. Okay, I pulled up a picture, just to demonstrate this, I pulled up a picture of my wife, Chelsea. Oh, there we go. You can see it's drawing a box around her face. Okay, so it's figured it out. It's found a face in the picture. And now we can take a picture of a picture. To get that to work, I had to switch over the focus area over to wide. So if you are using face detect, you're probably not picking a specific point. Wide is probably what you want. It's two different philosophies. Either you specifically control the focus point or you just want the camera to do the thinking. I don't mind. If you're taking lots of quick snapshots and you don't want to fuss with it, then using smile and face detection is really helpful. I will say when you have it on, like I said, it slows everything down a little bit. So if you're taking pictures of dogs or something, it doesn't hurt just to turn it off. Now let's talk about how to use IAF. With this, the camera will not only focus on the face, but it will focus on specifically on the person's eye. And you really only need it if you're using like a big telephoto lens or the 50mm f1.8, something with lots of background blur, because that's where precise focusing is really going to make a difference. Now, face detect will work passively. It'll just find faces all the time once you have it turned on. Eye detect, you have to push a button to activate it. So let's bring out Robo Chelsea here once again, and I'll show you how to use it. By default, eye detection is mapped to the center button here in the directional pad. So let's get her in the frame, and then I'll hit that center button. And you can see it found her eye. See, let's draw on a little green box on the eye. So when you use that, it's going to take an extra beat, but it will focus more precisely for you. The center button can be hard to push, especially if you're holding the camera with one hand. So you might consider remapping it to a different button. If you want to remap it to a different button, hit the menu button, go to the camera 2 section here, and then page 8. A lot of pages here. And now we can select that and choose which button you want to assign it to. If you have this lever up here at AF/MF, then what you can do is select that and set AF/MF button to IAF. I know, it's pretty confusing. So now this button here will do IAF as long as you have this switch at AF/MF. And I find that button to be just a little bit easier to hit than that button. So if that's something you use a lot, you might want to switch that. Let's talk about pre-AF. More AF options on this camera. Pre-AF tells the camera to autofocus like all the time. Even as long as it's turned on, it's going to be trying to autofocus on stuff. And it burns a lot of batteries because the camera is working all the time, but it can very slightly reduce the focusing time if you need to take a picture of something quick. It is an option that was more important on previous generations of the camera that didn't have such a great focusing system, but on this, you really don't need it, and you probably need the batteries more. To turn pre-AF on or off, let's go into the menu system, camera group 1, and then page 6 of 14. The third option down here is pre-AF. So we can set that off and you'll probably be okay. Now it's not going to be hunting for focus all the time. It's going to wait until you push that shutter button halfway. If you ever manually focus peaking can make life much easier for you. Focus peaking highlights the parts of the frame that are currently in focus, maybe like outlines them in red. I'll show you how to turn focus peaking on. If you never manually focus, just skip this section. You don't even need it. Just turn on focus peaking. We'll hit the menu button. On camera group 1, page 13 out of 14, scroll down to MF Assist, make sure that's on, and then peaking level here, we're going to set this to usually high is the best option. And now you can choose the peaking color. White will outline things in white, but I have a white screen here, so that wouldn't be good. So I would pick red or yellow, and I'll pick red. Basically, you just want to choose a color that's not prominent in the scene. All right, so now you can see there's no red outlines because I don't have it in manual focus mode. So we'll switch this over to manual focus mode. And as soon as I go into focus mode, manual focus mode, you can see now things are out of focus. There's no red highlights. And as I get those letters in focus, you can see the camera's outlining them in red. That lets you know that it's kind of in focus. You can't really trust focus peaking. It's not that precise. And so if you are going to use focus peaking, just know it gets you in the area. But sometimes focus peaking will have something highlighted and you get back to your computer and be like, it's totally out of focus. Why did you lie to me, focus peaking? I don't trust you anymore. I'm not using you. I have a lot of feelings about focus peaking. Just use it with caution, okay? An option that you might find better is that manual focus assist that I just had you turn on. When you turn that on, it will automatically zoom in. So as soon as I twist this focus ring on this lens, you can see, bam, it jumps in like that. And that zoom is going to be much more precise, like a digital zoom in. It's going to be much more precise. And I can kind of use that with focus peaking to make sure I nail the shot. I'm going to switch this back out of manual focus mode. Now let's talk about ISO. We talked about aperture and shutter speed. The third exposure setting that controls how bright your pictures are is ISO. And for the most part, I just leave ISO in auto. There are times when I manually set the ISO, like for night photography or if I'm working in a studio with studio lights. Most of the rest of the time, I'm using automatic ISO and then exposure compensation to change the brightness of the picture. ISO, spelled ISO, but pronounced ISO, is a description, a way to describe the sensitivity of the camera sensor. So a high ISO number, like ISO 3200, allows you to take pictures in low light, whereas a low ISO number, like ISO 100, provides like really great and clean pictures, even when you're outdoors. Now, if you're an old film shooter, you might have used ISO 100 or ASA 100 film when you were outside, and you know those pictures looked the best. But then if you had to take pictures indoors, maybe you jumped up to ASA 1600 or ISO 1600, it's exactly the same thing. And again, the camera can switch it dynamically. You don't have to change your film. That's a nice thing about it. To manually change the ISO or to select automatic ISO, look on the directional pad here. To the right, it says ISO. So we'll just push that. And now we can just move this dial up or down. All the way up is auto at the top of the list. Or if you want to manually set like a really high ISO, you can do that. I'm going to select ISO 51200 just to show you something. I'll just take a picture of this keyboard. And I'm going to review it and then zoom in with this button here. And as I scroll around, you see how that's all kind of like blotchy and grainy? That is the product of using a high ISO. That's sort of like, you'll get lots of red, green, blue speckles. And that's why you don't often want to use a high ISO. You always want to use the lowest ISO you can. But if you're shooting in super low light, you have no choice but to use a high ISO. The camera will figure that out for you. It will always use the lowest ISO that the situation calls for. So that's why automatic ISO is pretty good. If you want to know everything about ISO, including why it's not said ISO, visit sdp.io/ISO. That link just takes you to a free video, or chapter 4 on stunning digital photography. Even better if you buy my book. Let's talk about zebras. Not the animal, but a stripe on the image that shows you when parts of the picture are overexposed. If you're an old video guy, you know all about zebras because it kind of comes from the video world. I personally don't use zebras. I use the histogram instead. But I'll show you how to turn it on. I'll hit the menu button, camera page 2, and then the 4th item down is zebra. Because it's turned off right now. I will turn zebra, usually I go all the way up, all the way to 100 or 100 plus. Let's do 100 plus. And so now see those crazy lines? That means that part of the picture is overexposed. If I were to dial down the exposure compensation, you can see eventually it would disappear. Or if I used exposure compensation to make the screen really bright, eventually the whole thing would be overexposed. So it's just a quick way to let you know that part of the picture is overexposed. It's okay. It's pretty crazy looking. If something is overexposed, you generally can't ever recover it. Sometimes you can if you're shooting RAW, which I'll discuss in just a little bit. Another option besides using zebras is just to use the histogram. If I hit the disp button here up on the directional pad enough times, it will show me this histogram. That's kind of doing the same thing. That's giving me a view of the exposure of the entire scene. And on the left side, we have parts of the image that are dark. In the middle, midtones like this section here. And on the right, we have a little spike for parts of the image that are overexposed. So this little spot on the right tells me that part of the image is overexposed. It doesn't tell me where in the image is overexposed, just that something's overexposed, and I should look out for that. That's how to use zebras and histograms. Now the fun stuff, Wi-Fi. Getting pictures from your camera over to your smartphone. If you like Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or something and you're on vacation, you take an awesome picture with your camera, you don't have to pull out your phone and get a crappy version of the same scene just to make it easy to share. You can get pictures from your camera to your phone. So works on Android or iPhones. The first thing you're going to do is install the Sony app. So you'll go into your app store, search for Sony. Sony does a lot of stuff besides cameras, but you want to find the Play Memories mobile app. And notice that it's reviewed at 2.5 stars. That's because it doesn't work great. Not like a great app. It's kind of a pain, but it does work. So I'm installing it now. And when I get it installed, I'll click open, agree and proceed, scroll down. Oh, it just wants some information. Okay. Photography is my main profession. Oh my goodness. Okay, it would like to access your photos. You need to give it access to that. It would like to send you notifications. You don't really need that, but I'll click allow. Now that you have the app installed, you need to link it to your camera. If you have an Android phone, you can tap your phone against this NFC icon here on the right side. So just tap it like that. And then if by some kind of miracle, the phone actually communicates to the camera, it'll pop up and it'll link everything together. But I'll say I used an Android phone for years and it worked like 1 out of 10 times. It just like almost never worked. So I pretty much always ended up linking it together manually. So whether you have an iPhone or NFC is not working for you, at this point you'll want to get it working on the camera. Now, the easiest way to do that is to use the scan QR code of the camera option here. So I'll select this and it's going to tell me that I can scan a code and it will link it up. So I'll click OK. Play Memories would like to access the camera. I need granted access to that. Okay. Now I need to get the QR code up on this particular camera. You'll hit the menu button, go to the wireless settings, page 1. It's got that Wi-Fi app up there, and then select Send to Smartphone. And I usually find it easier to select my pictures on the smartphone, so I'll select the second option there. And now it's starting up Wi-Fi on the camera, and there's my QR code. So that block there with the codes is QR code. So I'll use my phone like I'm going to take a picture of that, and then hopefully it gets in focus. There we go. Okay. Scanning complete. After pressing OK, it wants me to press install. So I'll click OK here. And now it's going to install settings that will allow it to connect to the wireless network. I need to type my PIN. Don't look at it, you scammers. And then it's warning me, click install. You'll probably see a different process if you're using an Android phone, but Android tends to be much easier. It tends to just all connect in really nicely. Profile is installed, so I'll click done. And then I'll click open to go back here. Okay. When installing is complete, it will want me to connect to the wireless network. So click OK again. So easy. All right, so now that I'm connected in, I have to actually go into the Wi-Fi settings on my phone here. And go back to Wi-Fi, and you'll see choose a network. And now here, direct, this was the network name that it gave me. I'll click that. It's already got the password, so at least I don't have to type that. And you can see the camera is saying sharing. So now I can switch back, double tap the home button, switch back to the Play Memories mobile app, and bam, so quickly I'm connected. So now you can see a variety of the different pictures that I took, including a picture from my smartphone that I took with the camera. If I hit copy, it will transfer it down into my phone, and then it's on my phone so I could share it. So right now I could fire up Instagram, add a new picture, and there's the picture from my phone. Not too bad, right? Basically, you'll just go in, select send to smartphone, and then connect to the Wi-Fi network on your phone, and you should be able to browse from there. While I'm on the topic of Wi-Fi, I do want to talk about the different apps that you can get access to, because those also require the Wi-Fi network. So on the phone here, I still had it set up to share pictures. I'm done, so I'm going to click cancel. To view the different apps on the phone, you'll go into the menu system and look for the fourth page here, the one with the little blocks, and then select application list. Now you go to, if you don't have any apps installed yet, you go to Play Memories camera apps and select that. If you already have apps installed, you can use the second option. Now this is going to require internet access. And you can see my camera is already connecting to a wireless network because I connected to my home network earlier. So the first time you'll do that, you'll have to pick your home network and then type in your password. It has a little touchscreen keyboard, which is kind of unreliable. It's really flaky. So you might have to just type that password really carefully. Now I can browse all the different apps that are available. One app you almost certainly want, and it's a shame they charge you for it, but the time-lapse app here is really useful for making time lapses. It has an intervalometer built into it too, so it will take, 100 pictures once every second. It's a cool feature. It should be built in, but it's not. I can select the time-lapse app here and actually buy it and install it. When you do this, it's going to want you to have an account basically on the PlayStation network, because somehow those account systems are the same thing. And I'm already logged in on this particular phone. I suggest it's going to allow you to set up your account and create a password and everything on the camera. That is a nightmare. It's really tough to use that touchscreen to do anything. So I suggest going to your computer and visiting SonyEntertainmentNetwork.com, making an account and logging in and doing it on your computer, and then coming back here and just typing in your username and password. The time-lapse app is really useful. There are a couple of other apps that you might want to do. I'll scroll over to all here. Some of them are free, so you don't have to pay for them all. One I like that's free is the touchless shutter. You can use the touchless shutter to press the shutter button by just waving your hand in front of the camera like that. And I like that because I don't have to set that 2-second timer and I don't have to carry a remote shutter release. So that's actually a nice and free app. Thanks, Sony, for that. Now let's talk about RAW versus JPEG. Every image that you look at on the web is pretty much in a JPEG format. JPEG takes all the data from your picture and compresses it down. It makes the file much smaller and easier to share, but it also throws out some detail, like detail in bright clouds or in dark shadows. And if you want your pictures to look as good as possible, you probably want to keep that detail. RAW files keep all that detail. You can decide later to save the image as a JPEG file to share it, or you can pull up all those shadows and really rescue a picture that's under or overexposed. So for that reason, I like everybody to use RAW files because they're so much more flexible in the way that they edit. They're also a little bit bigger, so they take up a little more space, but big memory cards are certainly cheap in comparison to the camera itself. Even if you don't do any editing on your photos now, I suggest shooting in RAW and shooting in JPEG, taking 2 versions of each picture, just so that future you, who gets Lightroom 2 years from now and wants to go back and improve all the pictures that you took now, just so that you have that option, because you can always delete the pictures later, but you can't ever go and pull a RAW file out of a JPEG file. If I haven't sold you on RAW, visit this link, sdp.io/rawvjpeg, where I demonstrate the reasons that you might want to use RAW. So to turn on RAW files, I'll hit the menu button here. And then we're going to go over to the left. On the very first page here, very first item, that's how important it is, quality. So I'll select that, and either RAW, if you're comfortable using RAW, or if you're not sure about using RAW, select RAW and JPEG, and that will make 2 versions of each picture, one in RAW and one in JPEG. Don't worry, if you import them into an app like Lightroom, it will know and it will only show you one version of the picture, so you don't have to sweat it. Anyway, that's how to do that. I'm going to briefly cover metering modes. You don't care about this. You can just skip it. Unless you're one of these old school guys who's like, I want to know how to turn on spot metering. That's who I'm talking to. Everybody else can skip to the next section because the default metering mode is fine for everything. As long as you know how to use exposure compensation, you can get anything done. But if you're one of those guys who wants to change the metering mode, hit the FN button here and then go over to this top right corner, metering mode. You can select that and then scroll down to center weighted, spot metering, etc. That's all there is to it. But really, the default option here is pretty much the best for almost every situation. Let's talk about using flash. This has a built-in flash. You can make it pop up. See this little lightning bolt icon? Universal symbol for flash. Push that and watch this. Johnny 5 alive. So cute, this little flash, but it's worthless. It's a terrible little flash. It will fire, and it will just like wreck whatever pictures you take with it because it's so small and so close to the lens. It's a lousy flash. I recommend never using it, but basically you can just turn it up and then it will automatically fire once you pop it up there. If you don't want to use it anymore because you realize it wrecks your pictures, just push it back down. If you actually need to take flash pictures, pull this plastic thing out of the hot shoe and buy a Sony flash or a third-party flash that works with Sony and put it right in there. But for the most part, you can just use natural light with this camera and you'll get really good results. Chapter 3 in Stunning Digital Photography talks about when and why to use flash and how to get good results with it. So check that. But for the most part, you're probably happier using natural light. You can adjust the output of the flash when you have it up. In case the flash is too bright, I'll give you a hint. It's pretty much always better if you turn down the flash a little bit. Like the less you use that flash, the better. To adjust the flash exposure compensation, hit the FN button here. And if we scroll over to this, you see the little lightning bolt with a plus or minus? Flash exposure compensation. I'll select that. And if I scroll to the right, +1 will double the amount of light that comes out. +2 will quadruple it. +3 will take it 8 times brighter. Where I like to use it is -1.3. So that's a little less than half the default output. So it's adding a touch of light, what we call fill light, and it won't overpower your subject. It won't completely blind everybody and blow out their faces. And that's a little more useful. But natural light's probably where it's at with this camera. Let's talk about white balance. This is another thing that you can just skip. Look at the table of contents, jump down to the next section. But if you want to know what white balance is, it's Well, you probably have already experienced it because sometimes you'll take a picture and it'll be a little bit yellow or orange or green or blue. That's getting the white balance incorrect. Your camera, like your eye, will, or your brain really, will look at a scene and figure out what the color white should be, because often the lights around us aren't really white. And you probably didn't notice that incandescent lights are a little bit yellow. You didn't notice that because your brain pretty much adapts for you. If you're old enough to remember when we switched from the old light bulbs to the new like LED and laser lights and stuff, we went from having orange lights to blue lights, and you'd notice it in traffic because they'd be mixed together. Anyway, your camera does a pretty good job of figuring out what the right white balance is, so you probably never need to touch it. And you can always fix it in post in an app like Lightroom. But if you do want to manually set the white balance, chapter 3 in Studying Digital Photography discusses this, hit the FN button here and scroll over to the bottom row, third item in. That's white balance by default. Now you can scroll through all the different options. The one I just leave it at all the time is auto white balance though. But otherwise you can scroll through and just see what looks right or what describes your situation. Let's talk about how to record video with this camera. This is an amazing 4K video camera. The results are just gorgeous. They compete with very, very expensive video cameras. That's one of my favorite things about the camera. To record video, first I suggest changing the mode dial over to this little video thing here. You don't have to do that. But when you do that, it will zoom the display in for you so that you see exactly what you're going to get. If you don't do that, then as soon as you go to record something, it will suddenly crop it in, and it can be very confusing because there's some crop with the video. Now, that's basically all you need to do. Otherwise, it's just like taking a regular picture. All you need to do, instead of hitting the shutter button here, you're going to push this terrible recessed record button here. It's kind of hard to hit, but you'll push it and it will start to record. And now you're recording video. That's about all there is to it. But let's talk about how to change the different video modes, because you might want to be in manual mode so that it doesn't change the brightness of the scene arbitrarily, or you might want to have it in an automatic mode where you can control the aperture or shutter speed or something if you're into video. To change those things, I have it in video mode. I'm going to hit the FN button and then go to the lower right corner here and select that. And this will allow me to select between the different modes. If you don't know what you're doing, select the program auto mode and that should be fine. If you want to control the aperture, of course, aperture priority mode, shutter priority mode, or manual will give you complete control over it. So I'll select program mode. And now it's handling the exposure for me automatically. You can use exposure compensation just like you would in regular shooting modes. It works exactly the same. There are a few options that you can change in it, such as recording in HD or 4K, recording in slow motion mode. To change those, you'll hit the menu button and you'll go over here to the group 2. And in group 2, second item down, you'll see file format. So I'll select that and I can pick between XAVC-S, you can ignore that, 4K or HD. And those can just basically be your options. When you're in 4K, you can go down to record setting, select that, and then pick 30p at 100 megabits or 30p at 60 megabits. 100 megabits will give you higher quality video, but it will take up more space. 60 megabits will give you lower quality video. That should be just fine for most things, and it consumes less space. If you're shooting a film, or if you just want to shoot for PAL, you can shoot at 24p. That means 24 pictures taken every second instead of 30 pictures taken every second. But most of the world nowadays, if you're on YouTube, wherever you're sharing videos, you probably want to be at 30p. That's what we use. So for me, I use XAVC-S 4K at 30p, 100 megs, and that's just what I use all the time. You can also shoot slow motion with this camera, in which case you'll want to drop down to XAVC-S HD. That will record pictures at 1/4 the size, but it can do it much faster. So now that I've selected that, I can go down and change the record setting to something faster, like 120p at 100 megs. And that means that it's recording 4 frames for every 1 frame that you could see. So you could do 4 times slow motion if you slowed down the playback in post. Rather than having to bring that video file into an app and changing the speed and then re-rendering it, you can change it in camera by selecting the S and Q settings here. So I'll select that. And now you can see I have separate record settings and separate frame rates. So you could have it record at one of these, whatever you want to actually publish it in, and then change the frame rate here to whatever you actually want to record in. So again, this is now set up to record at 4x or 5x slow motion, depending on whether you're publishing it at 30 frames a second or 24 frames a second. If you do plan to record 4K, you can't just plug any SD card in there. It has to be a pretty fast SD card. The cards that we prefer are the SanDisk Extreme Pro cards. You can check Sony's website or look for reviews for cards that work well with it, because sometimes you'll put a card in and it will record for a while, and then we've had them actually fail after recording for a bit, because sometimes it'll try and fail. But again, the SanDisk Extreme Pro SD cards work well for us. Cards can change over time, so I don't want to get too specific about it. Overheating. This camera will overheat when recording 4K video. You'll see it in a couple of phases. When it's starting to get hot, you'll see a little red thermometer pop up on the screen. That means it could shut down at any time. Then later, if it gets too hot, it will simply turn off. And that can be a really frustrating moment. The first time we recorded something with this in 4K, it shut off. It warned us at 5 minutes and then shut off just a couple of minutes later. And that was in a cool room at like 68 degrees Fahrenheit indoors outside of direct sun. But your results will vary. Different copies of the camera seem to overheat at different times. And I've had the same camera that overheats in a not consistent way. So it'll overheat in 5 minutes one day, and then in the same conditions the next day, it'll go for half an hour and be fine. I've seen people put 5 cameras together and start them all recording, and then one will overheat in 5 minutes and the next will go for 45 minutes in exactly the same conditions. I don't know what determines whether it overheats or not. I will say it will overheat, so you should be prepared for that. They pretty much all eventually overheat. There are a few things you can do to reduce the overheating, and for one, keep it out of direct sun. Even if it's cold out, the direct sun is going to make it much hotter. Flip the screen open like this. You can also actually record with this battery door flipped open. That just lets out a little bit more air. So that helps with the cooling. A little bit of moving air around it can help a lot too. But be prepared to tell whoever you're filming to stop for a little bit while it's recording. You can also drop down to a lower resolution, like just do 1080p, and that should prevent the overheating. There is a weird option in the camera that will tell the camera to keep recording even though it's overheating. And when you turn this on, I'll turn it on now, I'll hit the menu button here. It's going to warn you and be like, you could melt your camera or something. And I don't know, like, it's in the camera, so they give me this option, but I don't want to break my camera, so I'm just going to show you where it is. I'm not taking responsibility. I don't know if it's going to break your camera or what. Hit the menu button, go to the toolbox, page 2. Scroll down to Auto Power Off Temp. Standard makes it overheat fairly quickly. That's the default. Or if you select High, it says the temperature of the device may rise to prioritize recording time. Would you like to change this setting? And you can select OK. And again, I don't know why that's not on by default. I will say, if you have that set to high, which will let it record for longer, the camera will get so hot that you cannot physically touch the camera. Like, it's okay if it's like, it will literally burn your hands. So be careful about that. Let's talk about how to format a memory card. The memory card, if you recall, is your digital film, and eventually you'll fill it up. At that point, you should put it in the SD card slot on your computer or memory card reader, unload those pictures, back those pictures up somewhere, like the Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or some Dropbox, wherever. Put it somewhere off-site so you don't lose them if your computer starts on fire or somebody steals it. Once you have that backup, you can format your memory card. To do that, turn your camera on, hit the menu button, go to the toolbox icon, page 6 out of 7. The top option is Format. So you'll select that, and then select Enter, and it's going to erase all your precious memories. If, like, you didn't mean to do that, somehow you accidentally did that and then confirmed it, you can undo it. Visit this link, sdp.io/photorec. You can download a free tool for Windows, Mac, Linux. Put your memory card in your computer and it will go through and find all your pictures and recover them for you. Don't pay for an app. That one is free and it works really well. By default, this camera will beep when it focuses, like beep, 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 beep. That's super annoying to everyone around you. So you should turn it off because you're a considerate human. To turn it off, you'll hit the menu button. Up in the toolbox here, scroll over to the first page and then go down to volume settings. And you'll set that to 0. You see I already had it turned off, but turn it all the way down to turn the volume off. Thank you. Stops the beep. There's so much more to customizing this camera and getting the most out of it and fine-tuning it to the way you want to use it that I put it in a separate video, customizing Sony. So visit sdp.io/mysony and I'll go over how to like fine-tune it to exactly how you shoot. One thing I do want to mention, just the highlights, is delete, confirm. This is something that I find really useful. Delete, confirm, you know when you go to delete a picture by hitting the trash can button here when you're reviewing them, you'll have to, it selects cancel by default, so you have to hit delete and then scroll to the right and then confirm it. On the toolbox icon, page 2, you see how it says delete, cancel first or delete first? I'll just like delete first. And now I'll take a picture and then if I go delete it, you can see delete is selected there. By the way, touchscreen doesn't work for that stuff. You just have to use the directional pad. Another option you might want to set is the display quality, because by default, the display quality is set lower, which will save some battery power. But if you set the display quality too high, everything will just kind of look nicer in the viewfinder and on the back screen. So for those times when you're not trying to stretch out the battery life, you can turn that display quality up. It's in the same part of the menu, toolbox, and then page 2, go down to display quality and just set that to high. When you're done, you might want to set it back down to medium, or if you want to stretch it out a little bit. Let's talk about adapting lenses. This mount, you can stick any Sony E-mount lens on there, but you can also stick just about any lens ever made for SLR systems on here. Sony makes an excellent adapter for putting on Sony A-mount lenses. So if you find that the Sony native lens lineup doesn't meet all of your needs, you can get an adapter that will adapt it. Now, those adapters vary in functionality. You can get full functionality with autofocus and control over aperture if you are shooting on a Canon or Sony A-mount lens, and those work pretty well. I'll recommend a Canon adapter in just one second. You can get limited autofocus and aperture control on Nikon adapters if you find an adapter that supports autofocus. There's like one out there and it doesn't work very well. So I wouldn't rely on that autofocus. For just about everything else, from like Leica lenses to Pentax lenses, you can get what are kind of dumb adapters that will not communicate to the camera, but will allow you to take pictures. Even if you have like old Canon FD lenses, maybe your grandfather left you a camera and you want to try out some of those lenses, you can mount them here. Just go to Amazon and search for Sony E-mount to whatever it is, like Canon FD adapter, and you'll find something that will allow you to put it on there. However, with those dumb adapters, the camera will not be able to speak to the lens, and it won't take a picture because it's like, it thinks it doesn't have a lens attached. So there are a couple of settings that you need to change. Hit the menu button, go to group 2 of the camera icon, and then go down to release without lens. And you want to set that to enable. So that will allow you to take pictures with dumb lenses. Another thing you want to change is steady shot. Steady shot moves the sensor around to cancel out your camera shake. Once you have the lens attached, pick steady shot settings and steady shot adjust. You'll have to set it to manual or it'll automatically change. And then the steady shot focal length, you'll select that and set it to the focal length of the lens that you've attached. So that way it will optimize the movement of the sensor based on the type of lens that you have on there, because it does this automatically when you attach a Sony or a smart lens on there. You only have to do that when you attach a dumb lens. That concludes the tutorial part of it. Now I'm going to talk about some stuff you might want to make your photography experience better, software, lenses, and stuff. First, really, you're going to have a lot of pictures that you need to organize. I strongly suggest checking out Adobe Lightroom. Photoshop is good for heavier editing too, and Adobe like leases them to you now. They sell them like you pay monthly. It's like $10 a month in the US, and it's kind of the best way, but you get 2 awesome apps, and it's actually a good price, I think. You can pick it up at sdp.io/Adobe deal. As I mentioned before, you want at least 2 batteries. I like to travel with 3 fully charged batteries. Pick up the extra batteries at stp.io/npfw50. And how are you going to charge those things when you have 3 batteries? Here is a dual charger that's pretty cheap. You can charge 2 batteries at once. Pick it up at stp.io/fw50 charger. Now let's talk about lenses. Your kit lens is okay. It's not that versatile. It's not that sharp. My favorite overall lens with the Sony a6500 is this, the 18-105 f4 lens. It's incredibly versatile. It's good enough to get portraits on the long end, shooting wide open, and to do a lot of sports and stuff. It's a really fun lens to use, and it's fantastic for video. Has a little slide there for smooth zooming. Visit stp.io/Sony105 to pick that up. If you want a good low light lens, a good walking around lens, I suggest the Sony 20mm f2.8. It's a pancake lens, so it barely extends beyond the grip of this. It's almost pocketable. Visit stp.io/Sony20 to buy that. Super wide angle lenses are useful for landscape photos, and like if I go to Europe and I'm photographing in the streets, those streets are so narrow, you pretty much need a super wide. Pick up the Sony 10 to 18mm f4 at stp.io/S10. For portraits, an inexpensive option is to get the Sony 50mm f1.8, which gives you just beautiful background blur, and at the price, it produces fantastic results. Buy it at stp.io/S50 f1.8. If you get into sports, you're going to need some additional reach, especially this is good, but often you want to zoom all the way out to 200mm to really shoot across a field. I suggest starting with the Sony 70-200mm f4 lens. It's super sharp, and in fact, all those close-up pictures that you've seen of this over my shoulder, that's all taken with that lens on another Sony camera. You can pick it up on that link there. I also want to talk about the option to adapt Canon lenses to your Sony camera. If you have Canon EOS lenses, like Canon SLR lenses, you can put them on here and autofocus and control the aperture and get really pretty good results. There are a couple of different adapters that you can use, and this one is the cheaper version, and you kind of get what you pay for. So this is a good adapter. It will do a pretty good job. The Sigma MC11 that you can pick up at stp.io/MC11. The way they just attach to the body, and then you can put your Canon lens just right on there like that. And it doesn't focus as good as native lenses. It doesn't focus as good as a Canon DSLR, but it focuses. It does okay. If you find that you're using it a lot and you want better focusing, the Metabones Mark IV adapter is what I use, and it does much better, but it's expensive. It's more than $400. That's a lot just to use a different company's lenses, but pick it up at stp.io/MBIV. If you want to get into wildlife photography, Sony doesn't yet have great wildlife lenses for you. You could get one of those 70-200. You get the 70-200 f2.8 and then put a teleconverter on it. But that gets to be really expensive. A cheaper option, this set gets you a Canon camera, and it will cost you $1,300, but that's cheaper than trying to buy a Sony lens and get it worked out, and you'll get better results, I promise. I suggest picking up the Canon 7D. A used body you can pick up for $500, and then pick up a used copy of the Canon 400mm f5.6. We've used that combination for years. It produces professional results. The autofocus is fantastic, even though it's not brand new. At $1,300, that's a better combination than I could come up with using Sony gear. So use our links down there, stp.io/7D and stp.io/C400 to buy them. This has a mic built in, but it produces terrible quality sound. The mic I'm using now is the Sennheiser EW100 G3. And if you want to record somebody talking, it's great. It's a lab mic, so you pin it and then it's wireless. You don't have cords running around. It's also expensive, but it does great. stp.io/G3. And if you go to eBay, you might be able to find Sennheiser EW100 G2 mics. Those are also very good. They're almost as good, and they're quite a bit cheaper, but you can't often get them. So want to make prints, put them on your wall. We tested, I think, 12 or 13 different print services in the US. you can watch the video here, sdp.io/printit. I'll also say we just liked MPix. So you could just use MPix. They're not a sponsor or anything. I just like them. Tripods support your camera, so you can take a selfie or get a long exposure at night, take a 2-second picture, something like that. This is a good cheap tripod to start with. It's a cheap tripod, $50. sdp.io/tripod1, the Dolica tripod, has a nice hook in the middle. If you want a nicer tripod for travel, visit sdp.io/befree, BEFREE. That tripod is a higher quality tripod. It's over $300, or at least for the carbon fiber version that we use. But it's so lightweight and it fits in your bag. It folds down really tight. As I mentioned, you want at least one big SD card to keep in your camera. Visit sdp.io/SD to pick that up. But what I do is I buy one big SD card and I put it in the camera. But then I buy a bunch of cheap SD cards, like it could be 8 or 16 gig SD cards. You can get them for like $8. And I'll take one of those and I'll put it in my desk at work. And then I'll put one in my glove compartment. And I'll put one in my wife's purse. And I'll put one in my wallet. I'll put one everywhere. And you know why? Because at some point, you're going to leave the house without your SD card. And then you're not going to be able to take pictures. But then you'll remember, oh yeah, Tony told me to put one in my glove box. And that $8 just saved my whole shoot. So do that. Scatter some cheap cards around. Thanks so much for watching. I hope it was helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, add a comment down below. And of course, subscribe to see more free videos, because we produce free videos all the time. Subscribing is really the best thing for you. If you want to check out my books, visit sdp.io/store or go to Amazon and search for Tony Northrup. These books are going to do way more for the quality of your pictures than any lenses, than all these fancy gadgets in your camera. Keep it in auto mode, but follow the tips in stunning digital photography, and I promise that'll do way more than trying to figure out all this technical stuff. I make it really easy for you. Don't forget to share with your friends. Thanks. Bye.